Hello everyone. My name is Dr. Koyal Verma and I will be teaching you this course on community engagement and social responsibility. I teach sociology in the School of Liberal Arts and it's a pleasure to be here with all of you today as we begin this journey into the world of community engagement and social responsibility. Now, before we dive into the definitions or theories, let me ask you a question. What comes to your mind when you hear the word community? For some of you, it might be your neighborhood. For others, your college, your city, or maybe even an online group you belong to. But here's the interesting thing. While the word community sounds collective, at its heart, it begins with the individual self. It begins with you. And today, through this session, I want to help you see that link between you and the society and how you belong to shape and transform the community around you. This course, Community Project and Social Responsibility, is not just another academic requirement. It's an invitation to step outside of your classroom, to immerse yourself in the lives of real people and to experience firsthand how society functions, struggles and grows. So in Module 1, we are going to talk about the foundations of community engagement and we will be talking about concepts and approaches. Here, we'll build the groundwork. We'll ask, what does community mean in urban and rural settings? How do we identify social issues and problems that community face? How can we design community projects which are meaningful not just outside but also within Bennett University? And this course on social responsibility and community engagement will help you to build that connection. Understanding the self in this is very, very important because before we can talk about responsibility or engagement, we need to understand one basic truth. We do not exist in isolation. Every choice we make, what we consume, how we speak, how we act, has ripple effects that go beyond us. Sociologists call this interconnectedness of self and society. Think about it. When you choose to buy local produce, you are supporting a farmer's livelihood. When you ignore waste segregation, you are adding to a problem your neighborhood must collectively face. When you raise your voice against discrimination, you empower others who might not have the courage to speak. This is why understanding self within community is so essential. Our identities, whether as students, professionals, citizens, are always linked to the networks and systems we belong to. Now let me talk about something very interesting. It's called the systems approach. At this point, I want to bring in the work of Arun Maira, particularly his book, Transforming Systems, Why the World Needs a New Ethical Toolkit. Maira tells us about something very powerful. The problems community face, whether poverty, inequality, climate change, or unemployment, cannot be solved by looking at them in isolation. These are systemic problems. They are interconnected, and so our solutions too must be systemic. He calls for a new ethical toolkit, a way of thinking that is not about a quick fix, but about deeply understanding the relationships between individuals, institutions, and the larger systems they operate within. So, when we talk about community engagement, we are not just talking about volunteering for a few hours or conducting surveys. We are talking about seeing the world in a new light. For example, how the rural connects with the national policies, how institutions like self-help groups or cooperatives create resilience, how individuals like you and me play a role in strengthening or weakening these systems. This is the systems approach, to see the linkages, not just the parts, but the whole. Social responsibility is not just a buzzword. Now, let's talk about social responsibility. We often hear the term social responsibility, but what does it mean for us, especially as students? It's easy to think of social responsibility as something that belongs to governments, NGOs, or corporations. But let's shift that lens. Social responsibility begins with everyday practices, our awareness, our choices, and our actions. To be socially responsible, it is to say that I am aware that my life is connected with others. I take responsibility for how my actions affect those around me. I commit to contributing in my own way to the well-being of the community. In other words, social responsibility is about citizenship, not just legal citizenship, but ethical citizenship, living in a way that acknowledges your interdependence with others. Now, let's try and understand this interdependence from the perspective of communities, both urban and rural. One of the most exciting aspects of this course is that we look at different kinds of communities. We look at urban communities which are fast-paced, diverse, and complex. They are shaped by globalization, migration, technology, but also face challenges of inequality, pollution, and alienation. Rural communities, for example, which is another kind of community, is often thought as simple, but in reality, it is deeply dynamic. They balance tradition and modernity, are rooted in agriculture, and yet are directly impacted by policies, climate, and economic change. When we study these, we'll see that both are interlinked. The food you eat in the city is produced in rural areas. The labor that builds urban infrastructure often comes from rural migration. So rural and urban cannot be separated. They form a single fabric. Now let's talk about identifying social problems. Now, once we understand the idea of community, the next step is identifying social problems. This is not as straightforward as it sounds, because what one person sees as a problem, another may see as normal. For example, is child labor a problem? Of course, but in some families it is seen as survival. Is lack of waste management a problem? Yes, but for many it has become routine. So as future community researchers and leaders, we must train our eyes to see not only what is visible, but also what is hidden, those silent issues that communities live with every day. And here, we must be guided by two values, empathy and respect. Now let's talk about your projects, community projects. In Module 1, I will also help you take the first step in designing community-based project. The process looks like this. Selecting a community or group you want to engage with. It also means selecting a group within Bennett University. Also, identifying local institutions to collaborate with, such as NGOs. Forming teams to work on different aspects of the project. Assessing whether your project idea is actually feasible. This stage is crucial because it moves us from abstract learning to applied learning, from classroom knowledge to lived experience, linking the individual growth with community engagement. I would like to emphasize this one point before we move ahead. Community engagement is not charity. It is not about helping others from a position of superiority or power. It is about mutual learning and shared growth. When you engage with a community, you don't just give or receive. You receive stories, insights, resilience, and perspectives that you may never have encountered in your textbooks. And here lies the beauty. As you learn to understand communities, you also begin to understand yourself, your privileges, your assumptions, and your potential. This is why community engagement is deeply linked to personal transformation. So, to sum up today's introduction to Module 1, Community begins with the self, but the self always exists in relation to others. Social responsibility is not external. It is an ethical practice of everyday life. Communities, whether urban or rural, are interconnected systems. Arun Maira's systems approach reminds us to see the bigger picture and to work with ethical responsibility. Module 1 is about laying these foundations, learning to see, to listen, and to design meaningful projects that emerge from real community needs, such as, for example, Bennett University itself. That could be the most important primary community that you live in. As we move forward, I invite you to carry one question with you. How can I, as an individual, contribute to building stronger, more resilient, more just communities? Because in answering that, you will not only become responsible citizens, you will also become agents of transformation. On this note, I will leave you to think about how you look at the community and yourself within that community. I look forward to engaging with you in the future in the next few classes. Thank you.